I will call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for February 22nd, 2017. Rose, would you call? Oh, wait, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm skipping. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we're to roll call. Ms. Navarez.
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Cavazos.
Yes, I am here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
You.
Commissioner Martinez Cohen.
Hello.
Commissioner Armbruster.
All right. Do we have any changes to the agenda? No changes. Written communications. We have received some.
Chair Longstreet and members of the commission, I put near your adjacent to your packet a letter from some individuals related to the Arroyo Borough open space. We'll actually have a status report for you on that project, including public outreach initiatives and where we are with moving forward with park planning and creek restoration on your March agenda. So it's really just for your information to take home, not as part of today's meeting.
Thank you. Brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. I have not received any speaker slips for public comment, so we will close it and move on to the Youth Council report. We haven't had a visit in a while. Hi.
They wanted me to report, one, that they were fortunate to receive one of the Youth Making Changes grants, which, if you're not familiar with the Youth Making Change, is the grant is issued by other teams that are helping teams in the community to do projects. And so the Youth Council submitted a project with Just Communities Can Do, and they're calling the project ALMA, which is Adolescent Leaders Modeling Acceptance. And the purpose of the grant that they are going to do is that they are going to reach out to help undocumented students or youth that are in the community. They had a presentation presented to them where some of the students are saying that within the community, some of the undocumented youth suffer from low self-esteem, poor grades, failed attempts at higher learning. So the object of their grant is to hold focus groups with both documented and undocumented students to try to bridge the gap of understanding and to see ways that they can provide resources within the legal realms in which they can do that. So they're very happy to have received that grant, and so we'll be giving you more information as they go on about that. They also, as part of that grant, this Saturday, a group of the teams received training from some of the instructors from SBCC about Know Your Rights, and so there was about 40 students that came out even in spite of the bad weather this weekend, and so it happened this weekend, so they're learning about more things so they could also learn how to facilitate focus groups when they start to do that. Their annual teen leadership conference is coming up. It's scheduled for April 8th. The title of it this year is Creating Healthy Communities, and so they're hoping to train about 100 youth leaders from also as far as Thousand Oaks and Lompoc and also Ventura, and all the teams would get together to talk about subjects such as secondhand smoke, bullying, and teen dating violence. Also, the recruitment is starting, so we know for sure that we'll need students from DP and Santa Barbara High School. So if you know of some students who go to either of those two schools, also we are always looking for students from alternative schools or who are in independent studies. And so I believe that's going to be going to City Council with the exact dates for it, but we're always taking applications if you know someone about that. And then lastly, they met recently with the PAL youth leaders to talk about 1235 Teen Center. And so it was a great meeting of the two groups, and they're going to meet again next month to talk about how they can work together with the PAL's tutoring program, and the Youth Council will be some of the tutors at the Teen Center. So they're planning on doing these monthly meetings. And speaking of a youth intern, Jensen Steady, who's been coming and doing your report, has applied to be a youth intern, but he's still waiting for his recommendation letter, so we hope to get that to you hopefully within the next couple of weeks. And we also had another student, Michelle Quinn, who's also interested in going. And that's the report. Any questions?
Are there questions for Ms. Young? That was going to be one of mine, is encourage somebody to come and be up here on the commission with us, because we do really value having a young person on our commission and having that perspective. And the other one I wanted to ask you, since you're here, is the awards banquet. Is that going to be coming this spring?
Yes, it's tentatively scheduled for May 22nd. But we're also considering a Saturday morning. Sometimes it's hard for people during the week, so there's a committee that's meeting about it again on Friday. We had a meeting about it, but tentatively right now, and it's May 22nd, which is a Monday.
Will you make sure that all the commissioners get an invitation to that? I think it's a really special event, and we would like to honor the young people that work so hard throughout the year.
I will make sure to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Commissioner Committee Assignment Reports. And thank you, Ms. Young. It was good to see you again. Let's start with Mr. Cavazos.
Good to see you all again. How are you?
Yeah, it's been a while.
You've grown.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, it's good to be back. So I attended the Park Foundation board meeting last week. Learned of all the exciting things that Ms. Zachary is probably going to share or has shared. There's a lot of exciting things that are going on with the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm not sure when they're all going to be announced, but some good stuff. And also talking about what we're going to do this year and for fundraising, so stay tuned for some of that stuff. That's it.
Great. Ms. Martinez-Cohen.
Unfortunately, I don't have anything to report. Both of my committee meetings were canceled this month.
Okay. Mr. Lesnar Buxton.
I attended the neighborhood advisory commission where we received a report for SDPD on neighborhood association.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
On February 2nd, I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee site visits to the different street trees and setback trees that are on our agenda today, and we'll be discussing a little later.
Okay, and I did not attend the neighborhood advisory councils, but I did go to City Council on January 31st and spoke about our Parks and Recreation capital needs. Okay, do we have any commission staff communications? Now we're to ceremonial items. Employee Recognition Service Award pins.
Chair Longstreet, members of the commission, we had 3 staff from Parks and Recreation recognized at the City Council meeting on February 7th. They include Mark Alvarado, who's a Senior Neighborhood Outreach Services Supervisor for 5 years of service with the city. And then 2 staff with 10 years of service, Jose Ibarra, who's a grounds maintenance worker 2 in the Parks Division, and Jeff Smith, who's a Recreation Supervisor in the Recreation Division.
Congratulations to all of them. Thank you. Summary of council actions. So we have the minutes. The summary of council actions. Are there any questions about, there was a single item on it regarding the Cabrillo Ball Field renovation. Any questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to our minutes. We have minutes from January 25th for approval.
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
No,
And
I
that brings us to,
Abstain.
you're abstaining?
I
Okay,
am abstaining.
one abstention. Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Mr. Downey.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the first item on the agenda is 1533 Crestline Drive. There's a large Mexican fan palm on the property, less than 2 feet from the eaves of the home. The property owner is initiating a re-landscaping project and is hoping to get rid of some lawn space and put in drought-tolerant plants. The committee evaluated the tree and determined that there would be more value in a broad canopy tree than the Mexican fan palm provides. Their recommendation is to approve on the condition that a tree that would be appropriate for the landscape design and also can achieve 25 feet in height be placed as a replacement tree.
Okay. Are there questions of Mr. Downey? We do have a public speaker for this item. And the one thing before we go any farther that I would like to read is, any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission made pursuant to Santa Barbara Municipal Code Chapter 15.20, Tree Planting and Maintenance, or Chapter 15.24, Preservation of Trees, may be appealed to City Council within 10 days pursuant to provisions of Section 1.30.050 of the Municipal Code. So everybody has the same info. But here we go with Miss Kathy McGill, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Okay, this is what I do, right? Anyways, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about our tree. I'd also like to thank the advisory committee and Ms. Clark, who joined in. I was there. I eavesdropped, and I know it got a full and thorough consideration. I know also I am now pushing a boulder uphill, but I would like to humbly request that the condition is dropped and that actually we be allowed to remove the tree without the replacement. And my primary reason is that it's winter, so that you couldn't really see the full impact of the trees that are actually there. But the street trees right in front of it, there's 3 liquid ambers that that are tall and throw a lot of shade, and then the neighbors got giant elders that throw shade. So the issue we have with putting a 25-foot broad canopy tree is that it will impact our ability to do the drought-tolerant, basically watershed landscaping, because it will basically have nothing but shade. Once those liquid ambers come into leaf, there's no sun, there's moss. So that's really the primary reason we would like to have the condition to replace with a 25-footer removed and just allow us to remove the tree. It is, as also was mentioned, less than 2 feet from the eaves of the house, and it goes up like 40, 50 feet. So it's not a well-placed tree. And I guess I also have a concern, and I know this is really pushing the boulder uphill. This is not a special tree. I actually used to be a homeowner in Scotland, and I brought in the Scottish National Trust to help get my trees listed because they were special trees. So I'm not adverse to protecting trees. I've done my own trees in the past. This one is a common tree in a bad spot, 28 feet from the inside sidewalk. So it's almost outside the need to even have a setback requirement or approval. And it's 2 feet from the eaves of the house.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Those are my reasons. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And we have no one else for public comment, so I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Are there questions or comments?
So, Mr. Downey, are you recommending that the tree is replaced within the same area? Because wouldn't that impact or potentially impact the house if it's that close to the eave of the house?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Cavazos, there is no recommendation about placement. I wouldn't personally recommend that the replacement tree go in that exact location, but there is space elsewhere in the front yard to achieve a tree planting.
And then a second question would be, instead of a tree of 25 feet, are there other recommendations for other plants that could possibly go in?
The committee's recommendation is conditioned on a tree that can achieve 25 feet in height, not one that is 25 feet in height at installation. But that is about as small as trees get. So there isn't anything less than that would be consistent with what they're already proposing.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question for Catherine. If
Oh, yes.
am I
Come
allowed
on
to
back
ask her a
up.
question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything has to be on tape. Yeah. So.
I was going to ask the same question that Ed just asked about the placement of the tree. Do you have objection to placing a tree in another area that maybe won't affect the shade that's already there?
It's impossible to place a tree in this front garden in a spot that will not affect the shade. What we actually want to do is we have a smaller tree. It won't get to higher than 10 feet that we want to put not 2 feet from the house, but a few feet in front of that. That would take another tree that's in a bad spot and put it in a good spot and not impact the shade. The problem is it's a Santa Barbara, it's a small lot, and it's completely, almost completely shaded as is with the street trees, which are 3 large liquid ambers. Okay. And that's really our fundamental issue. I mean, the tree's in a ridiculous spot, but if we are forced to put a 25-foot tree there, we probably just will leave the tree where it is, which is, I kind of think is a hazard, even though I know that there was some disagreement about that.
Right. Okay. I was just trying to see if we could get to a compromise.
Which, by the way, respectful. I mean, I really respected the time, and I think that's what they were trying to do.
Right.
Miss McGill, what is the 10-foot tree that you are
proposing?
proposing?
I gave Ms. Clark my my paperwork.
It's another type of palm,
it's a smaller palm.
like a shrubby,
I think it's one of the ones that comes in triads.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Downey, is that a tree or a shrub?
I was going to
Chair
just
Longstreet and Commissioners, without knowing the exact species, the description fits pygmy date palm, which
Okay, there you go.
Under the municipal code description of a tree is not necessarily a tree because it's not single trunked and doesn't have the size that a tree would. So if that's the species, not really, but it would provide some canopy in the front yard.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clark.
So from what I recall of our visit, the Street Tree Advisory Committee didn't see a good reason for removing that palm in terms of you're wanting to put in a drought-tolerant landscape. The tree doesn't require a lot of water. It's close to the house, but the arborists determined it's not really a specific threat to the house. So they felt, in effect, that they were extending a measure of goodwill by saying, okay, you can take it out, even though we don't see a good reason, if you serve the principles of good urban forest management and replace it with another tree. So they felt there was not a legitimate reason to remove the tree, but they wanted to recognize your rights as a property owner and respect all the work you're putting into a drought-tolerant landscape as long as they could replace it and maintain our urban forest. That's where they were coming from with the replacement.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I guess I would have a question. With the liquid ambers being bare at this time of year, is this something? I mean, it is quite close. There's 2 trees in our picture that we have here, right in front of the house. Will we be seeing good canopy cover in the summer?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the liquid amber trees tend to be a more upright growing tree and don't have real spreading canopy until they get way mature. Mm-hmm. Given that these are in a narrow parkway, I don't believe that they can achieve their full potential because of the restrictions of the hardscape. I believe there is space in the front yard for a shade-tolerant tree to be planted. and still work well with the liquid ambers.
Okay. Well, it's to the commission now. And I would entertain a motion. I think this is one of those tough ones in that we want to see the homeowner be able to develop a good landscape in their front yard that they're happy with. I do. No? No questions, no comments, no motion?
Are you motioning?
No, I need my agenda to go ahead and motion. I can say.
I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of the removal based on the condition that the applicant replace with a tree that can accommodate her landscape plans and achieve a height of 25 feet or more.
Second.
Okay. Any comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
3-2. Okay. There you are. And I would suggest maybe working with Mr. Downey to come up with a tree that would work in your location. He might have some good ideas. Thank you. And now we're to item B1, which is 1401 Manitou Road.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, 1401 Manitou Road has a coastal live oak tree on the side of the property. I will remind the Commission that each side of a property that faces a public road has a front setback, so therefore this tree is in the front setback. The committee looked at the tree and determined it was quite valuable to the neighborhood. There wasn't much canopy in the area. They want to see the tree preserved. They commented that retaining walls could be installed near the tree to retain the soil so that the soil isn't eroding onto the sidewalk while still retaining the tree. Their recommendation is to deny the removal.
Okay, we have no speakers for this item. Questions of Mr. Downey?
Question. So in this case, there's some good photos. Unfortunately, I did not get to visit this tree, but in the case where there does need to obviously be some work done to this retaining wall to kind of support, it looks like the tree a little bit more, especially after all the rain. I see like one little sandbag there. I guess my question is, who undertakes that cost? Does that fall to the property owner, or because it's a street tree, is that on the city, or who would do that?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, the tree is actually a setback tree. It's a private property tree. The yard is also private property, so they would be responsible for the maintenance of that area, including a retaining wall if they chose to put one.
Mike, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask, are there any replacement trees that the owner has proposed or that are possible there?
Yes, the owner has proposed a avocado as a replacement for this tree if it were to be approved for removal.
I visited the site, and the question I had was about clearance in the street. Is that an issue? And that tree is a lovely shape. If you were to prune it for clearance, it would not have such a lovely shape, would it?
Chair Longstreet, the tree has minimum clearance at this point. As it grows, has been and will be an issue. But as the tree gets larger, there's more opportunity to create higher heights of the lower canopy because there's more canopy above it to train the tree to.
Okay. Thank you. Are there questions or comments? A motion?
What is minimum clearance? In terms of
the vehicle code says that if your vehicle is taller than 13 feet 6 inches, you have to make sure that the roadway is safe for you to drive before you drive down that road. So as the city maintains their trees, we do that with a goal of achieving enough clearance so that at least normal-sized vehicles can travel down the road. Those standards are a little different on our main arteries. We try to achieve a little more clearance on those roads. But there isn't a set standard that must be adhered to.
Okay. Any more comments or a motion on this?
I just wanted to make the one comment that I, of course, did visit the site, and I thought the tree was breathtaking. It's really hard to replace a coastal live oak with anything else that's comparable, and I think it would really materialistically affect the character of the neighborhood if that tree was removed.
I would agree with that. Motion?
Sounds like it.
Was that your motion? Let's do it.
I would like to make a motion that the commission deny the removal of the coastal live oak at 1401 Manitou Road.
Second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it passes unanimously. And that brings us to 433 Foxen Drive. And we do have a speaker for this item.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the tree at 433 Foxen Drive is a liquid amber tree. The applicant is in the process of revitalizing the property. Part of that is a re-landscaping plan. The proposal is to replace this tree with several olive trees. The concern is that because this tree is deciduous, it looks bare for several months. It drops a lot of leaves all at once. The committee looked at this and determined that it provided some value to the neighborhood, and their recommendation is to deny. Since the committee meeting, we've received 2 communications from the property owner. Mm-hmm. One of those was added information about concern for their sewer lateral and whether the tree might damage the sewer lateral, given references that this tree has an aggressive root system. I communicated back with the applicant on that typically sewer laterals run deeper in the soil than most tree roots, and any tree, no matter what the species, can enter a sewer line if the sewer line's already leaking. Given the location of the sewer line, it's unlikely that the tree could cause damage to it. It's well away from the trunk of the tree. After that communication, he raised the concerns for the storm drain you see in the lower right corner of the photograph here. With the rains we had this last weekend, there was that water at that location was cresting the curb, and his concerns are that the leaf drop might be blocking the drainage. I discussed this with Public Works staff. They have indicated that they've never had drainage problems at this location that they're aware of, and that given the amounts of rain that we had, we were having similar flooding without any blockage of drains. The other point that I would make is his proposal to plant 4 olive trees. Although the leaves don't drop at the same time, they drop year-round, and 4 trees of that caliber eventually will create more debris than this tree currently creates. So again, the committee's recommendation is to deny the removal.
Okay. Are there questions of Mr. Downey before we go to public comment? Okay. Well, let's open public comment. Mr. Kuhn?
Thank you, commission members and Mr. Downey. I was prepared to sort of summarize what I had emailed to Mr. Downey on Monday night. I'll try to not repeat what he said. But I had two concerns that I had emailed Monday night that were new concerns since I had submitted the application, and I moved into the house literally 3 weeks ago, so I'm learning more real world. One was about the storm drain, and you all have a picture of what I found there Friday morning. In terms of the olive trees dropping their leaves, the benefit of being able to working on a new landscape plan from scratch is the placement of those trees is under my control. And even on the landscape plan, I think they were further away from that corner, from the storm drain, than this particular tree was. The second point that I had mentioned in my email to Mr. Downey was I'm just learning more about the liquid amber tree myself, and just from a little research, I've found how hated it is by homeowners, largely because of these, not just the leaves, but the spiky seed balls that it drops. One website said that, quote, it's appears on many top 10 lists of the worst trees to plant in your yard. And I found out that, in fact, at least one city, Springfield, Illinois, created an official program to replace all of its liquid amber trees due to nuisance and safety hazards of these spiky seed balls. And if you look at my property, the driveway is on one side of the property and the front walkway is on the other where the mailbox is, and there's no sidewalks on Foxen. So my plan was to create a footpath from the driveway to the front walkway, which would be going under this tree. And it seems to me like the nuisance and safety hazards could easily be avoided. And I would hate to have to live with them when I could avoid them by replanting the olive trees. So that's basically it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. It's back to the commission. Questions or comments?
I have just a general question. If you wanted to prune any of these setback trees, do you have to get approval to do that, or can you prune them as you wish?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the municipal code regulates removal and the degree of pruning that can occur. So long as the pruning doesn't exceed the definition in the municipal code, there's no permit required to prune it. Some folks would, when there's a disagreeable portion of the tree that might fall, would mitigate that by having it pruned out, which is feasible here, although it might be rather expensive to do. So they could do that without a permit, so long as they don't prune the tree too heavily and exceed the definition in the code.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Mr.
So
Kavaz.
the replacement trees are olives? Is that what I'm understanding? Are there other trees that could be suitable replacements? I think one of the things that I'm looking at with this one, with the last case, I was kind of torn, but I think I agree with Ms. Clark's statement that it's a really beautiful tree, and I think it suits the neighborhood. However, with this one, I don't really know if I'm a big fan of these sweet gum trees either. I think when you're a kid, they're awesome because you can throw the spiky balls,
Liquid
but
amber.
as a homeowner,
Liquid amber.
liquid amber, that was just same tree. So I'm wondering if there's other trees that could be used to replace this one here.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I'll answer that by saying that I manage over 450 different varieties of trees. And we live in a community that it has a climate that can tolerate so many species. So there's always other species you could look at that might fit your likes and needs. The one thing I want to point out is every tree drops something. And it's going to happen either in the fall or all year long, depending on whether it's an evergreen or deciduous tree. Olive trees tend to be one of those that are considered messy as well. I would be happy to have conversations with Mr. Kuhn about, selections of trees. We actually developed a guide to help people make decisions about what trees to plant, which I'll be happy to provide to him, meet with him and discuss his choices. We don't typically regulate what trees people plant on private property unless it's part of a bigger development. And then there's a landscape plan that gets approved as part of the project. But to answer your question, there's a wide variety of things that could be planted.
Thank you.
And so if we deny it, then Mr. Kuhn would just have to come back and go back to the drawing board with another possible tree and see if we can get that one approved?
I would say not necessarily. Removing this tree may suit the plan developed by his landscape architect, but this plan could also incorporate this tree into his front yard. He's looking at putting in 5 olives that will be pretty small trees. It will take them, 5 to 10 years to achieve any height or any canopy. And that liquid amber will be very important come summer as far as being a shade tree, being a piece of our, that's the only skyline type tree in the neighborhood. I would encourage him to develop his plan around that tree. It may entail moving the walkway a little bit closer to the house, but plant the young trees around it and then see what happens in 5 years. Whether you have enough growth that you don't have a barren landscape. And sometimes we need to look at it from a block away. I mean, that's how we view trees in Santa Barbara, is not just from our front yard, but from the entire community. And it's been that way here for many years. So I would encourage him to move forward with his plan with the liquid amber in it.
Chair Longstreet, if I could add to that. To go further to answer your question, Commissioner Cavazos, nothing about the decision today precludes him from coming back at a later date to request the removal of that tree. By incorporating it today and having his replacement trees grow a bit, the removal of this tree in the future would not be as big an impact to the community than it is today. So I believe that's what the committee was considering, was that maybe today it's no, but in the future it might be yes.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments or questions? And I understand about the storm drain issue, but I would never make a decision about taking a tree out or anything after last Friday's storm. Last Friday's storm had nothing to do with our reality here. I manage a property that I spent all afternoon cleaning drains, so it just was what it was. No, you can talk to Mr. Downey afterwards. But now, any other comments, questions, or a motion?
I would like to make a motion to deny the removal.
Okay. So you're going to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee?
Concur
Okay.
with the committee. Mm-hmm.
All righty. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
3-2. As I said earlier, any decision made by this commission can be appealed within 10 days. Thank you. And that brings us to the director's report. Oh, wait a minute. Excuse me. I'm skipping Indio Muerto. We have a street tree master plan change. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the 900 block of Indio Muerto does not currently have a designated tree. It's a small block that runs between the South Milpas and the freeway. Consists of a few small businesses. The proposal for this area is going to be a hotel, and it will incorporate the whole half side of that block between the freeway off-ramp and Indio Muerto. As part of that, there will be required to plant street trees, as every development is. The committee looked at this on several occasions. The applicant was hoping to plant a couple of Mexican fan palms to replicate the others that are in the area. And they are providing planters in front of the hotel for tree spaces. And there is one large planter directly adjacent to the freeway off-ramp at the dead end of that road. The committee determined that the New Zealand Christmas tree shown on the right photo here would be well suited for that area because of the ocean influence, provide a sparkle of color, and the Mexican fan palms would be consistent with others in the area. In addition to that, they are proposing the red flowering gum be placed in the planter at the end where the freeway off-ramp is. Again, you can see that the colors are very similar to the New Zealand Christmas tree. They felt that a larger tree in that location would do a better job to block freeway activity from the use of the area. So the recommendation is to co-designate 3 trees: the Mexican fan palm, the New Zealand Christmas tree, and the red flowering gum.
Excellent. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Downey? A motion to concur?
I'll make a motion to concur with the Street Trees Advisory Committee's recommendation to co-designate those 3 trees. Do I need to say them all?
No, you do not need
Second.
to say them all. And the 900 block of Indio Muerto. So there we go. Second to that motion?
Yeah.
Seconded by Mr. Cavazos. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. That passes unanimously. Now we will move to our director's report. Ms. Zachary.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, you have in your packet a written report. I'm going to briefly go through it, and then I'd like to add something related to what we've been dealing with. We just talked a little bit about the storms that we've had recently. We've seen some pretty significant impacts to our trees and our parks. I'd like to walk through some slides with you to sort of illustrate what's been going on. But before I do that, would like to first let everyone know that summer recreation is going to open for registration in the middle of March. We'll be up and running on our website on March 1st. We have many of our very popular camps and summer programs that'll be offered. And we're really working on a focused marketing campaign, not only for the web, but to coincide our outreach with the Independent Guide, sending out mailers to residents with the idea that people will have a couple of weeks to kind of peruse their options, and come March 15th begin signing up so that we can gear up for the summer season. It always takes me by surprise that we're working on summer starting in January. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes by recreation staff and marketing staff to gear up to launch, and then once we launch, there's a swirl of activities, and then before you know it, summer starts. So that's moving forward. We also are recently initiated a facility rental promotion, and in your packet it documents what that includes. But it includes, like, for example, a 50% discount on the beachfront facilities in the Korea Recreation Center. One of the things that we have to do as a department, as you know, is find ways to raise revenue in order to support our programs and our services, and our facilities and facility rentals play a key role in that. One of our approaches to improving our marketing and outreach is to find ways to offer promotions, make it more affordable for members of the community to come in and use our facilities, and to plan ahead, because if folks can plan ahead, we can also plan ahead. So that's moving forward. The Park and Facility Sign Program, that's something that the Commission saw. I think it's probably been at least 6 months now. We've been working away diligently on the final designs. And we will be coming forward with programming for 12 of our parks, and you might ask why just 12? Well, actually, working with our design consultants, we'll pretty much nail down the format and function of each one of the sign types if we focus on these particular 12 parks, and they're outlined in your staff report. And then we'll be able to take those templates and internally create signs that we need for the other parks. We have about $75,000 left in our capital program to move forward with implementation. We're hoping that by late March, early April, we'll be able to start putting it out to bid and get a sense of how many signs that funding will cover, and what kind of funding shortfall we might have, and then probably phase those signs in as we go forward. But we'll be back before you to give you a sense of what will be unveiled in the near future. We're very excited about it. It's been a long process internally. We spent, I think, a year with the sign committee getting through our approval process, but we feel confident they'll be great once they're out in our parks and our facilities. Smoking ordinance update. I briefed the commission at the last meeting. The ordinance committee had another meeting to talk about smoking ordinance changes, and it's citywide, so it's not just parks and recreation facilities. And at that meeting, the ordinance committee concurred with a staff recommendation to essentially make all of our parks and recreation facilities smoke-free, with the exception of the golf course. And that's one area that we put forward as perhaps being an appropriate location for an exception outside of the sort of active use areas. So it would be smoke-free around the clubhouse, the restaurant, the driving range, the putting green, essentially where most people congregate, but that people out on the golf course, if there was someone smoking, they would have as many as 3 other people that would choose to be with them versus have to deal with secondhand smoke they weren't interested in. And there'd be enough distance between the players such that it wouldn't have an impact on other players. And the ordinance committee looked favorably on that. They will be coming back and looking at it in more detail because they've got paseos and sidewalks and more difficult issues to address before any smoking ordinance updates move forward to council. The commission will ultimately see draft ordinance language once that's developed. And then actually a couple of things just to mention in your upcoming meetings. At the March 22nd regular meeting, we'll be bringing forward the Arroyo Borough open space. So that's the former Veronica Meadows property. The city is currently undertaking revisions to the zoning ordinance. So at the Planning Commission on March 2nd and March 9th, this parcel is actually called out for rezoning and rezoning from its specific plan housing designation to Parks and Recreation with the designation of open space. This is something that the commission also looks at and makes recommendations to council on. So you'll have that on your March 22nd agenda. We'll use that opportunity to ask for your input on where we're going with the open space. And we've been engaged in some public outreach. We'll be doing more, and so it'll be an opportunity to float some of those ideas past you and get your input on how we would move forward with the open space type of development that we'll be looking at, as well as the creek restoration options that we have. And then in April 26th, it's our budget. It's our 2-year financial plan. The commission has a work session the Wednesday prior, which is the 19th. We'll be looking at some changes in our department budget just to deal with reorganizations and changes in programs, and then use the opportunity. We have a number of new commissioners who've never been through our budget process, and so sometimes a little primer helps so that you have the opportunity to see it more than once and get any of the questions or considerations you have considered and taken into account before we go to council with our presentation. We have 1 tour scheduled for March 18th, and most commissioners can make it. Thank you very much. And we'll be going to key facilities that we're either currently working on or that we'd like to be working on if we had additional capital resources. And I neglected to mention at your March 22nd meeting, we'll also be talking about the broader picture of the department's infrastructure needs. The City Council recently approved a contract to do polling related to the feasibility of putting a sales tax measure on the ballot in November. Depending on how that pans out and the decisions that the council makes come June, and depending on what the voters decide in November, if it's on the ballot, it could lead to additional funding to address some of our very, very serious infrastructure needs, above and beyond just what we're working on today. When you saw our capital program, you saw the numbers there. I'll be honing in on really some very key facilities that could really benefit from additional funding to move them forward. And then with that, to the director's report related to storm impacts, we had a lot of rain. Many of you who read the newspapers, look at the online news, know that Anapamu Street in the Stone Pines, we lost 3 large trees there. They believe the first one fell on Friday, and another one fell next to it, and then we had one fall on Saturday. So we want to run through some of the photos of the different locations and then talk a little bit about our staff response. I have Tim Downey and Santos Escobar here, where they can speak to some of the things that we've been working on. So this gives you a sense of what it took to address those large stone pines. We actually didn't get working on them until Saturday because a crane had to be brought in. And then this is the tree that's adjacent to the first large one that fell down, and it gives you a sense of the scope, the scale, and the canopy that it has or had. And the Saturday tree is at the end of Anapamu, at the corner of Anapamu and Milpas. And my report from Santos is it literally just went. And I don't even know if it was raining at the time that it did that. So it was waiting to fall and fell. And then in other places of the city, throughout the city, we've had trees. Anacap at Yananali, trees on East Beach were affected. Dixon in the neighborhood, San Pascual, more trees fell down. Hidden Valley, we had 2 eucalyptus fall in the roadway, and then we had another one in Hidden Valley Park fall. And then also, I believe the next slide will show Chase Palm Park, and this is the area that's sort of between the sidewalk and the parking lot, so to the east of the skate park. And then La Mesa Park, giant eucalyptus tree that fell on Friday as well. It is within feet of the playground that we replaced last year or the year before that. So luckily there was no damage to the playground in that location. And then you've probably read about and seen around town, we've had some mudslides in various places. Hale Park was impacted. This is along Eucalyptus Hill Road. This is where we have the historic wall that was originally part of the Peabody estate. Portions of that wall fell down. And then at Parma Park, this is the entrance at Stanwood, and that shows you actually where we did some park improvements. Gosh, at this point, I think it's probably 5 years ago. We had a slide there at the rain event that we had in January, and then a following slide in this last event. And then Mission Ridge Road, that's Franceschi Park above it. So some of the examples that we had in our facilities and in our areas. I would just like to say, and certainly encourage the commissioners, if you have any questions of Santos and Tim, our staff have been working around the clock. Forestry staff have been on call and on duty Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're on call tonight because we have wind forecast. And the same thing with our Parks Division staff. People that came in Saturday, Sunday. I don't have a photo showing of the work, and I think we had to do this 3 or 4 days in a row where we had staff out at the Weir Gate at the bird refuge clearing it so that Cabrillo Boulevard wouldn't flood. So a tremendous amount of response from our staff resources. We have been able to use some contractor assistance, but I just wanted to commend them for their ability to be at work, for work those extra hours, and the hard work that they had to do. So with that, I encourage any questions you might have.
Do we have questions? Mr. Cavazos.
Not really a question. I actually want to commend Santos and Tim. I actually got to witness them in action firsthand. We have a tree in front of our house that I absolutely hate. I want to fall. But driving home, you looked at it and it's like, holy cow, I think that thing's going to fall. Coincidentally, it was right after we'd gotten Mr. Downey's notification of trees of our agenda. So I'm emailing him, hey, I think this tree's going to fall. Before I even hit send, I think Santos' team was out there taking a look at it. Literally seconds after I'd sent the email, so he never saw it. I think it was a call that my wife placed, but just seeing how fast you guys reacted and the care that you guys took and looking at the tree. Unfortunately, it's not falling. Well, I guess depends on who you ask. But no, really great job all around. I think it was really great to see. We need the rain. This is what we have to deal with when you get a storm like that. But seeing you guys in action firsthand, I thought you guys did a great job. So thank you for that.
Other comments? Ms. Clark?
Just along those lines, I was super impressed too. I reported a downed tree on the Douglas Family Preserve through Summers, and you'd already heard about it, and we're working on it. Thank you.
Martinez.
Yeah, I have a question. So the trees are falling because of they haven't had enough water, and then they got too much water. Is that accurate?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, this gets a little involved, but I'll try and make it as simple as I can. Trees stand up in two ways. Mm-hmm. They balance on their roots just like you balance on your feet. Mm-hmm. And the other way they stand up is the friction between the roots and the soil. Mm-hmm. So the roots grow through the soil, and there's a friction right there. When we have this much rain, all of a sudden, it makes the soil slippery. And that's the majority of the reasons the trees have fallen, because the wind blows, the friction isn't there to hold the root in the soil, and the tree goes over.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I was out Saturday afternoon on Anapamu to see the trees. Such a huge loss historically in our community. It's we're thankful that there was not more damage done and all the people were safe, but it was just a sad sight to see those giants down, and everyone was working so hard in it for the long haul. You could see you had quite a crew out there with the city and with the backup of all the contract work that you had. So thank you. I know that went on longer than any of us thought it was going to. It just kept coming. And I hope that on Sunday we don't get quite as much rain. But thank you so much, and please give our thanks to all the crews, too. All righty. And then that brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is Parks and Recreation Facility Public Use and Misuse Update. And this is an item that will be an ongoing item for our commission because of the issues involved in it. It's not solvable by our commission, but one we have to be aware of and work to protect.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, Rich Hanna, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. I'm here tonight to provide this update report on Parks and Recreation Facility Public Use and Misuse. This report is essentially a follow-up to the introductory report that we gave the Commission back in December 2016. At that meeting, the department kind of communicated areas that were related to concerns with use and misuse of our parks and recreation facilities. We talked a little bit about our management challenges as it related to those items in our parks and recreation facilities, and we addressed some site impacts related to the misuse issues. Tonight's report is kind of a follow-up to the department response strategy. So in the report in December, we kind of outlined some approaches that we take, and I'm happy to say tonight we're here to look at 3 different action items that came out of the December 2016 meeting and some positive direction that we're moving forward with. And I would also add that this is, as Ms. Longstreet just mentioned, this will be the first of many reports that the Commission will receive. We plan on being back on a quarterly basis And I think as we go through this, everybody that's a stakeholder or a key player at the table here is looking to broaden solutions to address some of these issues, both from a Parks and Recreation use standpoint and also just within the community. So the first item I'd like to talk briefly about is the use of parks to provide free meals. Following the commission report in December, we sat down with 18 stakeholders in the community. We had a meeting on January 20th, and I would say it was a very productive and positive meeting. During that meeting, we had stakeholders both from the department, the Santa Barbara County Health Department, C3H, Doctors Without Walls, many of the faith-based groups that support these services in our parks, and then representatives from various homeless coalitions. I would say that the meeting, as I mentioned, was very productive. It was our first time sitting down with a large group and really just kind of opening the first lines of communication and what we see in our parks, kind of a continuation from the report in December, and what we kind of envision moving forward. We also used the opportunity to kind of better understand the process and what was going on in our parks. And I would say that, you know, we learned more about the operations and we just learned. I think we found out that there's a good structure at the Alameda Parks and at Plaza Del Mar. We were made aware of other services that are provided during the free meals in the parks. We have a better understanding of a lot of these groups have already implemented post-event checklists and items to make sure that when they do leave the park, they're leaving it in a better way than they found it when they first engage and enter the park. So it was a learning process, I think, for everybody at the table and the department. We also, at that meeting, brought in the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department, and with us tonight, there's obviously speakers here to speak to this item, I believe, positively, but we also have Kendra Wise, who's here from the Santa Barbara County Health Department. She played a key role in kind of outlining a lot of the food preparation, transport, and service of food in the parks, more on the health department perspective, and that the food is really being provided in some cases to people that already maybe have compromised or vulnerable health systems, and the importance of making sure that that food is prepared correctly, is transported correctly, and then served correctly, and how that process would move forward as we begin to build a formal framework. And so from that meeting, we actually met with a smaller stakeholder group before this meeting that's coming up in March, just to kind of look through some of these options and identify some of the key components that we wanted to take from that bigger, larger stakeholder meeting. And one of those key things was, how do we go about, you know, making sure that the food that's prepared and served at these free meals and activities in our parks is safe and is treated the correct way. And Ms. Wise kind of gave several options on how they could go about that. We kind of boiled down as a group to it really should fall under the temporary food permit process. That's free, which was a good sign. One of the conditions of having these health permits is the health department actually there has to be a location where they're going to permit that these activities take place, which builds a little bit on our department's desire and need to really have a way that we can work more collaboratively with these groups in our parks to figure out where they're going to be, where the services are going to be provided, who we can contact, because they may not be the only user of the park on a given night, and we need to kind of be able to manage all the park users. And to be honest, fairly assign, if we've got groups in our parks that are providing these services and they're not the ones causing the damage because we have other users in the parks, we want to make sure that we're just not lumping everybody into the same group. So I would say we took away from that, and at the second meeting, we kind of had more of a discussion about how we would implement the temporary food permit, and the department's also looking at using more of an ongoing facility type application, which could be filled out one time for the year. We'd be looking at Alameda Park as a trial group. They have a very kind of a formal network of individuals and partners at that site. We would take that model and then move it to Plaza Del Mar, those being the two sites where we see the most structured free meals and services in our parks, and then use those models to kind of really capture some of these other activities that are going on. But this would be our starting point. And so at those two meetings, we felt that the information sharing continued to be positive. The fees, the process didn't seem overwhelming or too comprehensive. And so we've agreed to sit back down with the larger stakeholder meeting, again, primarily the Alameda group, on March 2nd. It'll be at 5:30 at night at the Parks and Recreation Conference Room to kind of help the groups that are playing lead roles in the delivery of meals at Alameda Park, walk through the processes, and if necessary, actually help them complete the applications. And both Ms. Wise and myself will be there to help and assist through that process also. Also, one of the key things that we took away from the meeting in December was really how can we continue to keep active recreation in our parks. And we've found through various approaches that when we have a park that's actively programmed, whether it's youth or adult activity, it discourages people from kind of loitering or hanging in parks and engaging in misuse type behaviors. And it also kind of puts more eyes on that park, and then they can be resources in calling in police resources or park rangers as they see what's moving forward. So recently we've been working with Santa Barbara Pony Baseball. They plan on returning to Ortega Park, as does Santa Barbara Special Olympics. Both of these groups use the outfield turf areas. Pony Baseball uses the baseball area. Special Olympics uses more of the grass area. And I would say their primary concerns were related to restroom access at the site. And so what we've done, and we talked about this in the December meeting, is we've made the Ortega Park swimming pool restrooms available for permitted participants, primarily youth participants that are using Ortega Park, to have access to that restroom. So it's a much safer environment for parents and coaches and so forth that are using the park. I would also add, and you may hear about this at a future meeting, is with the Peabody Stadium replacement at Santa Barbara High School, that's going to dislodge a lot of the varsity and junior varsity activities to the junior high. The junior high has a lot of community type use. We expect that use to then filter into our parks and our open spaces as well. And so we'll be looking at keeping the park as actively programmed as we can as we move through this process. Something that new that's come up is the Franklin Elementary School. We're looking to bring them into the swimming pool mix. So we've got a program in May where they want to bring a lot of their third graders over to the pool and get swimming lessons. Our Parks and Recreation staff, would actually provide the swimming lessons. It's just a 1 month type program, but here's a pool that's actively programmed for 4 months of the year and then kind of sits dormant. We're also working with Santa Barbara Swim Club to see if they have an interest in using the pool for their younger kids. And really, the only thing that's limiting us at that location for adding more activity is just parking in general. It is a tough place to get to. The next stakeholder meeting, March 2nd, 2017, I'm not sure how that's there, so I'm not going to speak to that. But I would say that we still recognize there's a sustained effort to increase activity in all of our parks. And we are looking at efforts or ways to even look at renting out the Ortega Welcome House, maybe engaging with a local community youth provider to use that on a more frequent basis, adding activities both at Dwight Murphy and Cabrillo Ballpark as well. So this is a sustained effort, a way of us keeping activity in the parks and hopefully dissuading some of the misuse that we see currently. Another response strategy that came out of the meeting is we've started to redirect some of our park ranger resources. The commission has had before them in a previous budget session, at least maybe 2 fiscal years ago, the need to add a third park ranger. That was really designed to look at having resources down in the beachfront, waterfront area, areas where we were having a lot of private rentals, special events. We have a lot of youth groups and activities down there. And so the third ranger came about kind of to address that need. We've gone through a series of lengthy recruitments, and we're happy to say we finally have a third park ranger who's about to clear his final training hurdle inside the department here, which will mean that the program's fully staffed at 3 rangers for the first time. One of the things that we're currently looking at, and we've actually employed, is we're with the 3 rangers, we're able to increase the days of service. So before, we at least had 1 or 2 days where there was no ranger coverage. We're also looking at expanding the service hours within the day. A lot of the ranger times would come on and work between midday and 8:30. The rangers have a responsibility to close the parks down at night and make sure everybody's out. They kind of fulfill that role as well. And then allow for crossover within the day because they're addressing other issues, and we don't want rangers just being by themselves in certain areas. What we've done is looked at a schedule that allows us to assign resources as early as 6:30 in the morning down in the waterfront area and still be able to maintain those park closure hours in the evening. And the early morning staff are really in the waterfront, kind of going places by like the Cabrillo Pavilion Bathhouse, where there's a lot of illegal overnight camping going on currently. Address other areas in the waterfront as activities start to move in for the day, making sure these folks are up, moving out, and so forth. And really, they have a direct, radio communication pipeline with the Santa Barbara Police Department. So having them on scene alleviates some of our administrative staff from having to deal with it, gives us a better sense of kind of starting to track the types of activities that we're seeing and where the resources need to be prioritized, and really just expands the service as a whole. One of the other things, and Lieutenant Olson was at the December meeting. He has been fantastic. As you heard at the December meeting, the police department is continuing to add officers and looking to expand both their beat coordinators and their community policing objectives within the city. One of the things that came out of that meeting is we'll be meeting with the police department as a department. So that would involve Mr. Escobar, the parks manager, myself, our park rangers, and then the key representatives from the police department, the patrol lieutenants, the beat coordinators, and we'd meet on a quarterly basis. We'd be able to share observations, look at strategies, look at ways we can maximize resources and target specific areas, and really work more closely together to kind of address some of these issues. One of the other things that we talked with the police department about, and we'll continue to do this, is we will continue to share a calendar that's kind of coming up for peak programming times, where we have programs in parks and areas that we addressed as part of our misuse and use report. And what we did this last summer is we provided the police department with that report. We asked that they had a greater presence as we were heading into the summer months. And by being there at the beginning of the program, and we had less issues and misuse behavior at that park, impacting parks and recreation programming, primarily for youth, throughout the summer months. And so heading into the summer months that Ms. Zachary alluded to, as we're getting ready to launch our registration here, we've got key times in the year where we have a lot more activity in our parks, and working with the police department to make sure we have a stronger presence when those activities get ready to start. And then just to kind of summarize where we're kind of heading is, we're going to continue our existing efforts. One of the things that I didn't talk about tonight is, we will continue to explore, physical deterrence in areas where there's misuse. We currently have an issue at Dwight Murphy bleachers, and we presented that in December. And how can we stop those bleacher areas from being an overnight camping area and a storage area because of the types of activities we have there? So we're going to continue to look at ways to curb misuse behavior through physical measures if necessary. Also, if we need to go in and change existing park hours to go from what's traditionally, most of our parks are open until 10 p.m. at night. If we want to change those to 1/2 hour after sunset, we can do that at the direction of the director. She has the authority to make those. So we'll be changing signs as we see there needs to be a fix in specific areas. I talked about this at the beginning. We need to continue to broaden solutions and just really come up with new ways to approach this. I am in no way an expert. I'm hoping after 4 or 5 quarterly reports, I can say that I'm more of an expert in this, but I'll probably be very much in the infancy of how this plays out in the community. And then really just come back to the commission and provide quarterly updates. I think this is something that should be coming to the commission on a quarterly basis, and hopefully we're bringing things forward that show that there is progress moving forward, and at other times we may be coming to the commission for some direction on areas where we should be pursuing that maybe we're just kind of hitting some stumbling blocks. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments as the commission sees fit.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Questions now. We do have 2 public comment. So let's start with Mr. Jeff Schaefer. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Longstreet and members of the Commission. My name is Jeff Schaefer. I am the Director of Initiatives for the Uffizi Order. I've been working with Rich and Parks and Rec on some of the plans around Alameda Park and some of the adjustments. One of my favorite people, Michelangelo, his life quote was, "I'm still learning." So I agree. There are things we can still learn and work on together to make this better for Parks and Rec, and that's part of what we've been hearing, and public health as well. So I just want to share briefly. We're working first. We have a 100-day plan around Alameda Park, working with Parks and Rec and public health on making the transition to meet everything that we need to continue to sustain our work. Then I'm also connected to the meal sharing at Plaza Del Mar, and then we'll probably take what we've learned from that and try to go to that meal sharing and do the same kind of procedure over time. So we do have 100 days where we're working on this. I wanted to let you know that the meal sharing is not just a meal sharing. It's not just a bunch of warm-hearted people that are compassionately providing food, though that's part of it. It really is what we call our care and referral. So our overall goal is to reduce homelessness and to get people out of homelessness over time. So I wanted to let you know also at the Alameda Park Meal Sharing, it's officially a program of Westmont College. So I'm working pretty closely with Westmont College. That's really why I'm there. I'm there to coach and debrief their Westmont students and make sure that they're safe in those kind of issues as well. So I'm working with them to bring them into the loop for some of the procedures that they're going to need to sign off on, as is officially their program. But the partners there are Westmont, Doctors Without Walls, Maria Long, the executive director is here as well if you want to ask her any questions. AmeriCorps, Common Ground, Chick-fil-A, Ocean Hills, Montecito Covenant, Christ Presbyterian, House of Judah, Willbridge, Showers of Blessing, Because of Hope, which is an empowerment organization, and Uffizi. We're all there. So there's various organizations that what I'm trying to do is bring more resources to help people with reunifications or housing or issues like that long term. So we recognize, though, as we're learning that as we're focusing on the impacts on homeless individuals, that the impacts are on the Parks and Rec staff, the impacts on the community as well, and well aware that we want to work to reduce those, and are going through the steps individually and as a coordinated effort as well.
Thank you. I'm
running out of time now. And
yeah.
I just appreciate the innovative approaches that people are willing to take to keep this, sustain it, because we're committed, and we're committed to doing our work. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be Joyce Berg.
Thank you. I'm Joyce Berg from Christ Presbyterian Church, and I'm on staff there as the volunteer and ministry coordinator. We're at Victoria in Anacapa. And we are a church downtown, and we are very much for Santa Barbara. So much so that we have become part of the downtown organization, and we participate in First Thursday twice a year and put on 2 beautiful events. And then also we seek to care for the people in our community. And one of the groups that we want to care for is the poor, along with children with fostering and the immigrant, and acclimating them to the community. But as far as the caring for the poor, we are a small church. We're about 170 people. And so collaborating with Uffizi and other organizations really enables us to care for people in the community, because it would be difficult to do that just on our own. I would say we probably have about 15 people that are involved. And for myself as the coordinator, I plan on being at the March 2nd meeting. Very much interested in learning how we could collaborate with the city to help the poor and to also care for our community. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Are there questions or comments?
Sure.
Mr. Cavazos.
Yeah, so regarding the meal sharing, I think, one of the things that I would recommend is getting out the word that you guys are doing more than just providing a free meal. I think there's probably a perception of many in the city that they think, oh, well, it's just a free meal. Of course, they're going to have homeless people there or poor people there. I think if you can get the word out that, hey, we're doing that, but we're also giving them resources, I think that would help, and I think you'd get more buy-in. And then for Mr. Hanna, dude, whatever you got to do to get activities going in there, because I've seen it firsthand, and I think we all know, the more that's happening in the park, people the badder elements tend to stay away. They'll move away. I mean, I remember every day when I was coaching, beginning of the season, it sucked. It was just like you had to deal with all the bad things there. But as the season progressed and as more teams were out there, and then you would have maybe soccer would come in, you would see it start to disperse, and nobody had problems going there. So, yeah, whatever you have to do to get activities going, whether it's pickleball or flag football just keep doing what you're doing. And, if you build them, they will come. So I think you're doing a great job, and just keep doing that.
Any other comments? I have a couple of questions. Alameda Park. How far away is this site from Kids World? Because that's where the mix doesn't work for me. At Dwight Murphy, it doesn't work for me because the children and parents, we lose them from our parks, and that happens regularly. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old grandsons, and I've taken them to Alice Keck Park, where there's drinking at 10 in the morning and bad language and inappropriate behavior. Where Ortega Park, I live near Plaza Veracruz, and it's so how far away and how is this working? Because Kids World is an important family place.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. So one of the things we'll be doing with the ongoing use application is actually identifying an area in the park, using an aerial map of where we would like any service to take place. We already use that for our commercial activities in parks, like our fitness group. So it's just carrying on something that we currently do. The area that we'd be looking at would actually be in the park, the western part of the park, further away from Kids World, more towards the gazebo, but not actually using the gazebo. One of the things that came to our attention as we were meeting with the stakeholder groups is I believe it's on Thursdays, there's a shower of blessing that takes place across the street at one of the churches there, and individuals can go across and take free showers in a facility that's across the street. So it's our desire to be using the western part of Alameda Park away from the gazebo, but close enough that they've got enough room to operate, and also use the church across the street for their showers on those given nights.
Okay. And Dwight Murphy, I mean, that's another one where we have a lot of, we have Saturday kids soccer, the youngest kids. We have the zoo across the street. Parents use that playground. And, so those are my concerns, and that's what I have to say to those of you providing services, is that, yes, you're targeting a specific group in need, and I get that, and I empathize. We have a larger group in need that is their recreation places or their front yards, and so it's incumbent on you to make sure that our whole community can be accepting, because that's not what's happening right now. So I really I'm glad to see you at the table now. I'm glad to see we're going to be moving forward on it. But I want to make sure our public spaces remain public spaces for everyone and not one group over another. So that's kind of where I stand, and I'm glad to see we'll be addressing this quarterly. And I, as Mr. Cavazos said, of course we always want more activity, but that's a budget-driven issue in most cases. Anything that we as a recreation department provide comes out of general fund money, so that's where we get sort of tied up, to me, in this stuff. So I think these partnerships that you're bringing forward are great, and thank you for that.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I'll just add, and I think you were speaking more to just the recreation use at both Dwight Murphy and Ortega.
Right.
Both of those places currently don't have what I would say free meals and services programs. One of the other things we heard from the stakeholders at the meeting in January was they really are trying to impart this stewardship type model, and at least at the parks where they're using them for these services, there's still going to be an enforcement component. And talking about both Ortega, which has really changed quite a bit from all of the activity that started back in summer and the physical removal of tables and barbecues, and then the park signage changes and things like that, we have seen a decrease in the activity there, but it's also come with a sustained effort from both the park rangers and the police department. And that approach, you're right, has to carry on to Dwight Murphy, because you're right, we do have some of the youngest youth participants participating in our programs there. We've got a great playground at that location. It's close to the beach. The zoo's there, and what we find is families really they choose to be in our program because they can be in that area for the day, which means they come in, they do youth soccer, then they can go to the zoo, then they can go to the beach. Everything's in that one centralized area, and we want to make sure that people feel safe while they're down there and they're recreating. And some of that's just going to come from enforcement, and some of that will help having the rangers on a different schedule where they're there earlier in the morning, kind of going by those areas and moving people out. So.
Thank you. Today, and I think it's a new era with our police department. Today, I drove up San Pasqual, and recently in my neighborhood, we've had some issues, gang issues, that we hadn't seen surface in a while. And there was a police officer having lunch at the Guadalajara market, sitting out on the tables, just having lunch. And I think his presence of being there and being in the community in a positive way is really important. So I'm thankful that we're seeing that new staffing levels so that they can have lunch. It's I think I'm hopeful moving forward that we'll be making some great progress. So any other comments or questions? Oh, Ms. Clark.
I just wanted to, I have children, so I'm very invested in the safety of our parks, and I'm also a nurse, and I take care of a vast number of homeless people who also have needs that are maybe just as important as our children, but not recognized because they're on the outskirts of our society. So I commend the people who are serving them and our department both for working together to find a solution where those needs can be met by both sides. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else tonight on our agenda? Are we done with our meeting? We done? Okay, then we shall be adjourned, and we will see you, I guess we'll see you at a site visit before our next meeting.